You think you know the story of the ugly duckling, a harmless little fable told to children at bedtime, meant only to soothe their fears of being different. Yet what if I told you that this simple story hides something far older, something carved into the very bones of European memory? What if the duckling's suffering and transformation were not merely a child's tale, but a fragment of a ritual that reaches back to the earliest migrations of human belief? Beneath the surface of this gentle fairy tale lies a current of myth and mystery that has rippled across centuries. Archaeologists, historians, and folklorists have found echoes of it in burial mounds, on carved stones, and in forgotten manuscripts. For more than 1,000 years, the story has whispered of rebirth, of exile, and of the secret power of transformation. Tonight, let us exhume the tale like an artifact from the earth and see what it truly reveals. Once upon a time, in a quiet farmyard, a mother duck sat upon her nest. The sun shone warmly, the reeds swayed, and soon her eggs began to crack. Out tumbled one fluffy yellow duckling after another, chirping with soft delight. But from the largest egg came a creature unlike the rest. Its feathers were gray, its body long, and its neck stretched awkwardly upward. At once, the farmyard creatures whispered, the hens pecked, the ducks quacked in disdain, and even the mother duck worried that this child of hers was wrong, a mistake of nature. From that day forward, the strange duckling endured ridicule. Wherever he walked, he was pushed aside. Children mocked him, farmers shooed him away, and the animals treated him as though his very presence was shameful. He fled from the farm, wandering through fields and rivers, through the harshness of winter and the loneliness of exile. He longed only for a place where he might belong. At last, after many months, the duckling saw a group of elegant swans gliding across a pond. Drawn to them, he approached in fear and trembling, expecting rejection. Yet when he gazed into the water, he saw not the reflection of an ugly, gray outcast, but that of a magnificent swan. The other swans welcomed him, circling him in a graceful dance. The once reviled duckling discovered that he had never been ugly at all, but only different, awaiting the time of his true revelation. And so the story ends. As every child knows, the duckling becomes a swan, and he lives joyfully ever after. But such a tidy ending conceals a much deeper story, one shaped by centuries of myth and mystery. The tale of the ugly duckling was first given written form in the year 1843 by Hans Christian Andersen, the Danish storyteller whose works often balanced light and shadow, wonder and sorrow. Yet even Andersen's pen did not create the story out of nothing. It drew upon echoes that had traveled through centuries of oral tradition, each retelling altering the feathers of the tale, though never the skeleton beneath. Andersen himself admitted that the duckling was a mirror of his own life. Born into poverty, mocked for his appearance and awkwardness, he endured years of ridicule before finding his place among Europe's literati. In this sense, the tale functioned as a personal allegory of alienation and recognition. But history shows that long before Andersen, European folklore abounded with stories of strange children born into the wrong homes, changelings left by spirits, or animals that grew into unexpected forms. By the late 19th century, the ugly duckling was softened into a simple parable for children, stripped of its sharper edges. Illustrators painted the duckling with almost comic sorrow, and Victorian moralists presented the swan's transformation as a symbol of perseverance and patience. Yet older sources suggest a darker undercurrent, the story of exile, the suspicion of difference, and the long pilgrimage toward rebirth. In medieval manuscripts, one finds marginal notes likening outcast animals to lost souls seeking redemption. The tale has thus passed through many hands, from Andersen's melancholy vision to Victorian comfort, from oral myth to printed nursery book. Each age reshaped it to reflect its own fears and hopes. But to understand its true power, we must dig deeper still, into the mythic substratum where swans, exiles, and transformations have long haunted the human imagination. If we place the story upon the table of myth and begin to examine its fragments, we discover that the duckling's journey is not unique, but part of a universal pattern. Across ancient cultures, the swan is a creature of mystery, a bridge between mortal life and divine power. In Greek mythology, Zeus himself assumed the form of a swan to unite with Leda, giving birth to beings half human and half divine. To the Celts, swans were guardians of the liminal, their white feathers a veil between this world and the other world. In Norse legend, Valkyries were sometimes described as swan maidens, descending to choose the souls of the fallen. When viewed through this lens, the ugly duckling is not simply a bird mocked by farmyard animals. He is an exiled spirit, unrecognized in his own time, wandering until his divine nature is revealed. His passage from humiliation to revelation mirrors the ancient initiatory rites where an outcast youth would be tested by isolation, hunger, and cold before being accepted into the circle of adulthood. The pond where he finally beholds his reflection is more than water. It is the sacred mirror, the liminal boundary that separates one identity from another, even further afield. In Indian mythology, the swan or hamsar is associated with wisdom and the power to discern truth from illusion. Could Andersen's duckling be echoing a tale far older than Denmark, an archetype that traveled with migrating tribes and shifting faiths? The evidence suggests so. What we thought was merely a farmyard fable may in fact be a coded survival of myths that once explained death, rebirth, and the revelation of the soul. The Duckling's transformation, then, is not a happy accident. It is the survival of a ritual drama, clothed in feathers, waiting for us to remember. In 1897, while excavating a burial mound in Denmark, archaeologists uncovered a carved piece of bone depicting a bird with an elongated neck. At first it was catalogued as an ornament, perhaps belonging to a necklace or ritual object, yet upon closer study, scholars noticed something uncanny. The carving portrayed not a fully grown swan, but a transitional form, a creature awkward, long-necked, not yet graceful, yet unmistakably on the path to becoming one. This artifact was dated to the early Iron Age, nearly 2,000 years before Andersen penned his story. Other discoveries followed. In Siberia, shamans told of the child of feathers, born ugly and unwanted, who later became the sacred bird of the spirits. In Finland, epic fragments preserved in runic songs describe a grey chick raised among ducks, but destined to ascend to the sky as a celestial swan. In Irish folklore, carved into oghamstones and retold in monastic manuscripts, swans are cursed maidens who wander in exile until their true forms are restored. When plotted together, these fragments form a striking pattern. From Scandinavia to the steppes of Asia, from Celtic Europe to Vedic India, the image of the awkward bird destined for swanhood appears. Scholars now suggest that the modern tale of the ugly duckling is not the invention of a single 19th-century writer, but the latest mask of an archetype thousands of years old. The core pattern persists: an outcast child, mocked or cursed, who journeys through suffering until the revelation of their hidden nature. This pattern has led many researchers to propose an origin in the Bronze Age, when migrating tribes carried with them myths of birds that moved between the earth and the heavens. Swans, with their migration cycles and their haunting calls, became emblems of transformation and liminality. Andersen's tale, then, may be the echo of a ritual drama older than written history, preserved like a fossil within the soil of storytelling. To most readers, the duckling's suffering is merely a story of patience rewarded. Yet if we decode the symbols embedded within the tale, another layer emerges, one that aligns with ancient rituals of death and rebirth. The egg, large and unlike the others, is the first symbol. In many traditions, the egg represents the cosmos itself, a shell surrounding life and mystery. From the Orphic egg of Greek myth to the golden egg of Hindu cosmology, creation is always born from an enclosed sphere. The duckling's strange egg hints that he is not of the ordinary world, but of another order, destined for revelation. The rejection and exile serve as a symbolic death. In initiation rites across cultures, the candidate was removed from the tribe, mocked, or even dressed as a creature to mark their otherness. They endured hunger, loneliness, and exposure, mirroring the duckling's passage through cold waters and harsh winters. Only by surviving exile could they be reborn into their true identity. The pond is the threshold, a reflective surface that doubles as a mirror and as an entrance to the other world. Water, in myth, often represents the passage between life and death. To gaze into the pond and see the self transformed is to undergo a mystical rebirth. The duckling does not simply grow older, he crosses a boundary, becoming something entirely new. Finally, the swan is more than beauty, it is purity, transcendence, and divine wisdom. In Christian mysticism, the swan became associated with the soul's ascent to heaven. In Celtic belief, swans carried songs that could lull mortals into forgetting their world. To see oneself as a swan is to recognize the soul's divine essence, long hidden beneath ridicule and pain. Thus the duckling's tale is not a children's parable, but a disguised initiation myth. It tells us that suffering is the necessary passage, exile is the crucible, and reflection is the gateway to transformation. What seems simple is, in truth, a ritual drama encoded in feathers. The story of the ugly duckling has long been told as a comfort to children, a gentle assurance that the mocked and lonely will someday find acceptance. Yet the deeper record reveals something far more haunting. This tale is not a recent invention, nor merely a personal allegory of Andersen's life. It is the survival of a myth older than kingdoms, older than written history, echoing the ancient drama of exile, death, and rebirth. Archaeological fragments show us swan imagery carved into bone and stone, appearing across vast distances. Folklore from Europe to Asia repeats the same pattern. The awkward outcast bird who becomes something divine. Ritual echoes suggest that this is the language of initiation, hidden in plain sight. The duckling's suffering mirrors the trials of youths tested by hunger and loneliness. His reflection in the pond recalls the sacred mirror through which initiates glimpsed their true selves. The swan, at last, is the emblem of the soul's immortality. When we read the tale with these eyes, it ceases to be a simple bedtime fable. It becomes a map of human belief, pointing toward the oldest fears and the oldest hopes. It is the convergence of fairy tale, spirituality, archaeology, and myth. The next time you hear of the ugly duckling who became a swan, remember, you are hearing the echo of an ancient initiation, whispered across thousands of years. And if that thought unsettles you, it should. For every story we take for granted may yet conceal the memory of the sacred.